Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Alpha Street Interviews. I have with me today Bruce Steel, who is the CEO of Equillium, a clinical stage biotechnology company. You can find Equillium on NASDAQ under the ticker symbol EQ. Hey, Bruce, good to have you here today.
Well, thank you, Arjun. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for asking. Bruce, why don't we start with a brief intro about Equillium and its history?
Sure. Well, look, it's a pleasure to be here and introduce you to Equillium and what we're trying to do with eculizumab, our lead drug candidate. Really interesting story. We started the company 4 years ago around this program. It involved a confluence of relationships that came together. My colleague, Steve Connolly, who is our chief scientific officer and one of the co-founders, had come across this program when he was working with me at our venture capital fund. So we were, prior to starting Equillium, equity investors in biotechnology ourselves. And he really, first of all, he's a scientist and heavily trained in immunology, and he really realized the importance of eculizumab and the drug target CD6 as a highly novel, but more importantly, the novelty compelling drug target in terms of its unique mechanism of action, whereby it selectively modulates a certain class of T cells that are involved in sort of a central way in the autoimmune and inflammatory cascade. The strategic partnership with Biocon, from whom we licensed the program, came about through our other co-founder, Dan Bradbury, who's a longtime leading San Diego biotech executive. Dan had developed a relationship with Biocon when he was running his last company, a company called Amylin Pharmaceuticals. And it was really that connectivity to Biocon, Steve's insights around the program, that gave us the opportunity to start Equillium. What was also kind of very intriguing and quite value added from our perspective was the fact that Biocon had heavily de-risked the program, both clinically through prior clinical development work they had conducted in the field of psoriasis, where they actually received approval in India for the treatment of psoriasis with eculizumab based on a phase 3 study they completed that showed the drug had a favorable safety and tolerability profile, but importantly, it was highly active as an immune modulating agent in the psoriasis setting. So that really de-risked the program mechanistically for us. And Biocon had also completed the scale-up manufacturing of the antibody, which, as you're probably aware, is non-trivial. And so, we're very comfortable with the manufacturing situation, given Biocon's deep expertise there. That also accrued significant kind of benefits to the company in that we didn't have to raise a lot of money to do CMC and manufacturing ourselves. So, really interesting kind of background in terms of why we started the company and the relationships that, sort of brought that about. We focused very quickly on identifying indications where we felt the drug could be a best-in-class therapeutic agent. We identified, over a dozen of those therapeutic options, and then had to sort of focus in on a few that we felt we could tackle as we were starting the company with the capital that we thought we could raise. And so when we completed our IPO in 2018, where we raised around a little over 72 million of proceeds from the IPO, that enabled us to embark on the 3 clinical programs that you'll see on our website today: acute GVHD, lupus and lupus nephritis, and a study in uncontrolled asthma. So a little bit of background and some of the people involved in starting the company, and directionally where we're building the business and taking the asset.
All right, that's a very detailed background, Bruce. Tell us a little bit more about your product pipeline and the expected timelines for your clinical trials.
Yeah, so good question. So we have seen what we believe are some very compelling results from the acute GVHD program. So we are treating patients with eculizumab in the first-line treatment setting on initial presentation of acute GVHD. These patients are severely ill upon presentation. They're presenting with graft versus host disease as sort of a downstream side effect, if you will, of a prior bone marrow transplant to address underlying malignancies. And while that transplant procedure generally is quite effective in terms of addressing the primary cancer that these patients have, many of these patients will come down with graft versus host disease, where that new transplanted immune system effectively starts to attack the recipient's own body. These patients have severe manifestations of disease in their gastrointestinal tract, in the skin, and other key organs and tissues. And today there are no drugs approved in the first-line treatment setting. So that's a very important aspect of this program, is that we are one of a very small number of drugs being evaluated in the first-line treatment setting. Standard of care today is high-dose corticosteroids, which obviously is not a great long-term treatment option. And for patients who don't respond to high-dose corticosteroids, their outcomes are quite poor, with very high mortality rates, approaching over 90%. So we believe what we've seen so far in terms of our response rates in our phase 1b open label study, where we've seen north of around 60% complete response rates, is a very meaningful outcome compared to prior historical data, where you've seen complete response rates in the 27 to 35% range from relatively comparative data. And that has led us to now take the program into advanced studies, where we are poised to initiate a phase 3 pivotal study. If successful, we believe that single study could support approval of the drug in this first-line treatment setting. So we're quite excited about that program. Again, no drugs approved in this first-line treatment setting. You have a number of drugs approved for chronic GVHD, including recently Kadmon's ROCK inhibitor that led to the company getting acquired by Sanofi, and a pretty significant $1.9 billion cash acquisition based on that approval. And then basically Incyte's Jakafi is also approved in the chronic GVHD setting and in the steroid refractory acute setting. So we think we have a great opportunity to potentially be one of, if not the first drug approved in the first-line treatment setting, where the unmet need is extremely high. In lupus and LN, we've completed the first part of our program there in lupus patients, where we dose patients twice, second dose 2 weeks following the first dose, through a pretty significant dose escalation, dose ranging study, where we saw good safety and tolerability of the drug at therapeutic levels that we believe are relevant. And we are now enrolling our lupus nephritis portion of the study, where we're enrolling both induction patients, but also refractory patients who are coming back in on induction therapy. We expect to have data from that program mid-year 2022. Interestingly, in the lupus patients, we did see a subset of patients who were not diagnosed with lupus nephritis, but did have elevated proteinuria outside of the normal range, both in terms of urine protein as well as albumin creatinine ratios. And we did see in that subset of patients relatively rapid and meaningful reductions in levels of proteinuria in that patient subset from the lupus cohort. So that was an intriguing observation that we were not really expecting to see. So we did provide that update earlier this year. And then in uncontrolled asthma, our drug modulates two of the key cell types that are heavily implicated in uncontrolled asthma, effector type 2 and type 17 cells. And so we have been conducting a phase 1b study in uncontrolled asthma. That study has been very difficult to enroll just based on issues with COVID-19. But we are expecting to have the top line data from that program imminently. So that'll be forthcoming quite soon. As I think we look into next year, our focus is going to be heavily on the LN study, where we're expecting to have data mid-year, and then fully mobilizing and launching the pivotal study for acute GVHD. But I think we'll look at potentially adding some additional therapeutic studies where we may be seeing read-through from the current studies. For example, either in the GVHD setting directly, or potentially in other areas such as the complete response rates we've seen in the GVHD program have included complete disease resolution and the lower GI involvement in these patients, which is really driving their morbidity and mortality. So that perhaps gives us what we think is some read-through into, say, ulcerative colitis as a therapeutic area. So we'll be assessing opportunities for indication expansion as we get into the year next year.
Okay, cool. And Bruce, what's your target market opportunity like?
Well, you mean in terms of across these indications?
Yes.
Yeah, so it varies. In the GVHD program, the acute GVHD segment, and as I talk about these, sort of potential market sizes, these are U.S. numbers, which is our core focus. There are roughly 10,000 or so of these bone marrow transplants, hematopoietic stem cell transplants that lead to acute GVHD. So there's roughly 6,000 or so patients per year presenting with acute GVHD. This is a therapeutic area based on other programs that are approved in the GVHD setting, where they have a sort of annual pricing model that is well north of $100,000 to $150,000 per patient per year if these patients remain on drug for a full year of treatment. So that represents a total addressable market of in the $500 million plus range in the first line acute GVHD setting. That would be if you captured all patients and made some assumptions around pricing the drug north of $100,000 per patient. We obviously have work to do as we're contemplating pricing and reimbursement strategies for the program, and ultimately the data from the program will, I think, dictate the value of the program to patients and to payers. But that's an example of at least that single indication in first line acute GVHD. I think what's important to note there is that the majority of these patients present at a relatively small number of leading transplant centers. So the sales and commercialization effort required to address that market is quite focused and small. I think you could contemplate fully penetrating that market with fewer than 15 to 20 people on your entire commercial team. So really attractive market from that standpoint. Certainly one that if we're successful with this program, I think fully sustains the company. That would certainly get us to what we think is a cash flow positive situation, and then you can continue to build from there in other therapeutic areas. So we do have as a primary goal at some point to become a sustainable company on our own. I think that should be the objective of every biotech company. Eventually raising capital from the equity markets on a recurring basis not only is a little bit tiring for everybody, but ultimately you need to get a product to the market. So we're pretty excited about that as our first potential product opportunity. And then if you look at going into the lupus and LN opportunity, lupus, hundreds of thousands of patients with lupus. LN alone is around 100,000 patients in the U.S. If you look at, say, where voclosporin is currently pricing their product, I think they've publicly stated that they're targeting something north of $70,000 per patient per year. So very large total addressable market. Our understanding is that our friends that are in here are off to a pretty good start with that program. So significant market opportunity, more competition there, more drugs in development. But again, we think we have a highly differentiated mechanism and a good mechanistic rationale for why we're currently studying the program in LN. And then asthma, is even a step up from there in terms of the patient count. They're probably, north of 1.5 million or so patients in the U.S. Who are uncontrolled, who are going to more advanced treatments with biologic therapies. Of those, we would consider about a third generally unserved. These are patients with sort of low to non-eosinophilic asthmatics. And until this week, there were no drugs approved to treat those patients. Interestingly, we just saw Amgen's tezepelumab get approval just this week. So, or I forget whether it was yesterday or Friday, but in the last few days. That's sort of a sea change event for the asthma population, who are otherwise not really well served by existing therapies that historically have targeted sort of T2 eosinophilic asthma. So they now have another, sort of drug in the armament for treating these patients.
All right, great. On a related note, Bruce, how do you see your existing balance sheet? Should we expect any fundraising in the upcoming future?
So I think we have a very good existing balance sheet. We reported over 90 million in cash at the end of Q3. Our operating burn rate is going up as we're building the company a bit, and poised to launch the GVHD program, which obviously is going to be a significant undertaking. That will be a multinational study with a significant number of sites. We, like all of our biotech peers, will be raising money at some point. I think the question is sort of when and how we do that. We're currently funded into the 2023 timeframe. So we don't feel any immediate, pressure to go out and raise capital, but we will certainly be at some point, bringing in additional resources, whether it's capital from the equity markets or something perhaps a little bit more, creative in terms of financing the program. We'll see, but certainly in the future we'll be bringing in more capital to support the longer term plan.
Understood. Makes sense. You had earlier mentioned about your partnership with Biocon. Can you just tell us a little bit about the nature of that partnership?
Yeah, it's a very strong relationship. Again, one that goes back actually, more than a decade through our chairman Dan Bradbury, directly with Karen Mazumdar-Shaw, who is the founder of Biocon and chairperson today. We have a highly engaged partnership. They are our exclusive supplier of all of our drug products, so we have a tight working relationship there to make sure that we are sourcing drug as needed for our programs. They also have rights to commercialize the program in other major markets outside the United States, Europe, and significant parts of Asia, and obviously in India. Within India, they have the drug currently approved for psoriasis, but in addition to that, the drug is approved under emergency use authorization for the treatment of acute respiratory distress and cytokine release syndrome in the COVID-19 setting. During the Delta variant that rolled through India earlier this year, there was extensive utilization of eculizumab in that patient setting. So, Biocon's pretty active with the program in India, and we have a highly coordinated overall kind of development strategy, and joint development team that meets regularly to review the program and review supply, kind of the supply pipeline and so forth.
Okay, great.
And they're a significant, stakeholder in Equillium as well. So it's great to have this partnership with Biocon as one of India's top leading biopharma companies with the resources and expertise that they have, not only in the program but also manufacturing the drug is I think a huge plus for us.
All right, great, wonderful. That's all I have for today, Bruce. Is there something that you would like to add to bring to the notice of investors?
Yeah, we're looking forward to a pretty exciting year next year with what we think is going to be, some very important data points around the program, and getting into our phase 3 program. So, we're now transitioning from, a little bit of an earlier stage company ourselves with sort of, 3, open label kind of proof of concept studies in the GVHD and lupus and LN program, and then the placebo-controlled study in asthma, and now we're moving into more advanced development with the GVHD program now moving into a pivotal study. So I think it's a pretty exciting time for the company. It starts to give us visibility on potential first approval of the drug in the not too distant future if we're successful with the acute GVHD program. So exciting year for us next year, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Great, wonderful. I'm sure investors would be looking forward for more updates from you. Thanks for your time, Bruce. Thanks once again, deeply appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope you and all of your audience have a great holiday season and stay safe.